Together is a 2025 horror movie, and it's about marriage, or specifically, the changes that marriage or long-term partnership brings, and it's not in a good way, I'm afraid. The leads for this movie, played by Dave Franco and Alison Brie, are a real-life married couple, so I guess they would have more experience with the message of this movie as they happen to live it. Now, most horror films, even the shitty ones, are often taglined the scariest movie ever. But in the case of this movie, it may be true, and you know why? Because marriage is a truly horrifying thing if you think about it. And yes, that applies to both men and women. Now, before you start throwing your tantrums and throwing bottles out of the pram like a pissed off baby, let me break down this statement for you. You see, when we are kids, we have this idea of romance and love that normally stems from the media that we tend to consume. This is often the Disney movie and princess and prince narrative that we have fed for years of our life. When we start going through puberty and adolescence, we start to romanticize life with our crushes and put them on pedestals. We envision the prospect of marrying them, starting a family with a kid or two, and having the perfect life, where hopefully we will live forever and ever in bliss and happiness. But reality, my friends, is rarely that kind. And unfortunately, all these fantasies and romantic thoughts is just the sheer amount of hormones that is being pumped through your body at that age. We just happen to confuse that with the meaning of life, when the reality is you just want to get laid. So what this movie does is take the same sentiment we all go through when it comes to reproduction and cohabitation, add in some disturbing imagery to tell its story and push its narrative, which I will admit at some points are effectively done while others are often laughable, to deliver a movie trying to talk about human relationships but whose message effectively boils down to this: it might be better if you don't participate. Now, I don't think the writers of this movie intended to send this message with their film, or maybe they did, but regardless of that fact, here we are. And as I've had to spend nearly 2 hours watching this insipid film, I hope you give me some time to analyze in, let's say, under 20 minutes, what I really think about this concept. So at the beginning of this movie, our male lead has lost his parents and also seems to have lost his sense of self. To make the message of this movie as obvious as possible, everyone keeps talking about how much he has changed since getting with his girlfriend, and this even includes his own future brother-in-law.
When you started dating my sister, I thought you might make her cooler. Instead, she's just made you.
Hey, fuck you, man.
The couple are moving to the suburbs on account of Millie, the girlfriend, getting a new job as a school teacher, and Tim, the boyfriend, is simply going along for the ride. And as it will be made painfully obvious throughout the movie, it's evident that Tim doesn't want to leave his friends behind and move on account of Millie, but he nevertheless follows because he feels he needs to. This is the movie's attempt at making the point that sacrificing your dreams and aspirations is an inevitable part of a long-term relationship, and this theme will be a permanent fix in this film. It is also at this point in the movie that Millie proposes to Tim in an effort to tie them closer, and he hesitates. And perhaps it's also the time to mention that Tim has lost his drive for sex too, which I took as a comment on how monogamous relationships often become sexless over time due to a myriad of issues. And take note that all this messaging and subtext is delivered by the movie before the 10-minute mark. So the couple move to their new place and they start to experience weird occurrences. The nightmares and nightmare fuel, the rats hidden in chandeliers, and the weird ever-encroaching distance that creeps up in between them. It is mostly due to the trauma that Tim is processing after discovering how his parents had ended up after years of marriage, and it's also fair to say this is why he is scared of that prospect himself. So they go on a hike, get lost in a cave where Tim happens to drink the water from that cave. Later on in the movie, Millie will unknowingly also drink that same water, and this is the trigger that starts to merge our couple together. You see, the thing about horror movies is this: they are rarely about the monster or spirit on the screen that gives a jump scare to the audience. In fact, great horror films are an allegory for a societal trend or expectation, and the horror that is felt from it is the fact that subconsciously you understand that. The Exorcist, for instance, is not about raving on a bed puking looking like a zombie. It's rather about the concept of losing your faith in the path you have chosen in life due to external circumstances. The original Wicker Man is about the danger inherent in making assumptions about things we do not understand, and Midsommar can be considered an allegory for the supposed dependency that females are forced to endure when in a relationship. Now, this movie also has its own monster, and it's not the cave nor the water that merges people together. The big bad in this film is the concept of arguments and disagreements, which can be considered a fairly integral aspect of all relationships. What the movie suggests as a solution is to radically bond and share everything together as partners. This theme is most prevalent whenever Mr. McCabe is on screen. You can think of him as the avatar for the merger, as he used to be two people now combined into one. He's also the person that gives Millie the water in an effort to hurry things along. But this simple message is often delivered too on the nose sometimes with the dialogue the characters are given. For instance, Millie telling Tim before he goes on his gig to stay out, be free, and don't come back so as not to feel trapped. I've always considered dialogue like this to be sloppy, as messaging in movies is better than when it comes through actions. But that scene is also a good attempt at a depiction of loss and freedom and individuality that long-term relationships tend to bring. For instance, after Millie makes a statement, Tim apologizes, tells her she is right, and says thank you. Furthermore, the concept of chasing your dreams in this movie while in a committed relationship is seriously frowned upon here. Millie is portrayed as the productive one for having a job society approves of, while Tim, trying to be a musician, is frowned upon. This particular point is made as messily as possible with what feels like a sledgehammer to the head with how it's delivered. If I am to put on my cynical glasses, I am guessing it's because dreams don't put food on the table, right? If you think I'm lying, this scene from the movie...
You think you're boring because what, you have an actual proper job? I loved him, but he is a 35-year-old white guy who still thinks he's going to be a rock star. That is fucking boring.
Let's also not forget this delightful scene.
You know, I have sat on the sidelines. I have sacrificed so that you've had space to try to make your impossible dreams come true.
Whoa, I'm not going to apologize for taking some risks.
And I never can because you used all the risk up.
I moved here for you. I left my whole life behind.
What life? Got your music? Then why aren't you at your show?
It's no accident. Fuck you, movie. The truth is this. The survival of any long-term relationship requires that both partners make sacrifices. This entire narrative pushing is incredibly offensive because if I am to get very tribal about it, then statistically speaking, it's men that often make these sacrifices of their goals and aspirations in order to facilitate most long-term relationships. But maybe I'm just being a sexist, right? The entire hair swallowing, nightmare scenarios, and nightmare fuel at night happens when they are supposed to be in bed for a reason. This is the movie's attempt at depicting the horror of sleeping with someone in the same bed for decades on end. You see, in most relationships, it's normal watching your partner and yourself physically change. It can also be considered normal to forget the shyness when you first began dating, to the point that you now laugh over farting in front of each other. And sometimes, not even paying attention to personal hygiene anymore can be considered normal too by some people in long-term relationships. I am sure to external observers, this kind of behavior is grossly horrifying. But we bear with it in the name of the concept of love and rationalize to ourselves that this is how relationships are. But the simple truth is, relationships require this kind of comfort if it will survive long term. Except the negative side of such lovely tolerance is the loss in genuine attraction or sexual impulse in both partners. If I can sum it up for you in another way, familiarity breeds contempt. The movie though is consistent with its message and is even inherent in the symbolism here. In the first scene, as they begin to merge, they have to do Valium so they can relax to stop the process. While this particular scene is more funny than horrifying, it can be considered as a reference to the habits we tend to pick up in order to cope with the stress of long-term relationships. For example, smoking and alcohol use. Furthermore, the scene with the saw to split their merged hand is also weirdly funny to me here, and massive props to the leads for this performance. I took this scene to mean the harm we do to ourselves as we resist the process of assimilation in relationships, but maybe you might have a different read on it. Let me know in the comment section below. While the quote-unquote harm in this movie is physical, in relationships it's often mental. Oftentimes, as you observe your partner, you will catch yourself thinking things like how hot they were, how much they have let themselves go, and how mundane life has become through this journey of matrimony. It's often at this point that people with some means start looking for the replacement to their partners. Those without the means start to consider the greater good, such as staying together for the kids, as they also start to look for qualities about their partner they can be okay with. Because at this point, the physical attraction is most likely dead. This, my friends, is marriage. And this is what the movie encapsulates so perfectly in its ending scene. There is a scene in this movie where Mr. McCabe tells Millie that the consequences of failing to merge can be ugly. Cut to the scene showing us the absolutely grotesque monster that the couple who failed to merge has become. Yes, the consequences of failing to merge is much more horrifying than that, I'm afraid. In real life, it's called divorce, and you are in no way scared enough yet. By the end of the movie, the couple have now become an androgynous person welcoming parents into the house who are basically color-coded. It's a subtle way of telling you there is no difference between them here. This unfortunately is also the truth about marriage. As said earlier, the alternative is not pretty, but neither is the blending process. In the end, we lose our sense of self to blend into something that you don't recognize when you look in the mirror. And that is the true horror, my friends. But in all seriousness, do you need a movie to tell you in current year 2025 that getting married or signing your name on a marriage certificate and tying all your future prospects and current assets to another person is a fucking bad idea? Well, I don't think so, because all you need to do is type in divorce rates in the Google search box and you will be more than petrified at the results that you will get. There is a reason that men's rights movements, MGTOWs, and feminism have been at each other's throats for decades by this point. And it's fundamentally over the same damn institution of marriage. On websites like YouTube, Twitter, and even in the news, you hear every day how people are being put through the grinder when it comes to marriage and divorces. So you really don't need a movie to tell you all of this. Yes, most of these stories are not pleasant, and the outcome for some is even more horrifying long term for most people. But we as humans are still enamored with the whole concept of getting hitched in the hopes of hooking up forever. Because the drive to procreate is a fundamental aspect in all our genetic makeup. Now, I'm not against the concept of lovers living together and raising a family. Far from it. Human relationships, especially between males and females, are symbiotic, and it works well when partners also cooperate. This is my circumstance, and I can tell you I'm very content with that setup. But here is the thing. I am also a firm believer that the concept of marriage is archaic, and in the past, it was only a means for wealthy families to combine and secure their wealth and properties. This is also why I don't believe in it in our modern times, because the implications when it goes wrong is life-changing. And mind you, it's not in the positive kind of change. To take that decision in the name of love, well, I'm sorry to tell you, love won't save you, and it's that simple. This movie makes it very clear by the end, and so does reality. As Guns N' Roses said, nothing lasts forever, and forever is a mighty long time. Till next time, friends.